back for our last of our biweekly webinars in the 2023 year. We're once again blessed to have Sam Snow on with us, who's going to take care of his skill acquisition part 2. The first one was an amazing, presentation, and I strongly encourage, if you haven't seen that, to go back on the YouTube channel and catch that as well, because I think both together will be an unbelievably good value, as well as tools for your coaching toolkit, if you will. But with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Sam. Thank you so much again for joining us for our last one of the year, and I'm glad you're with us.
Thank you, Warren. It's a pleasure to participate. Thank you for allowing me to join everybody with the webinar series. I think it's a great thing you're offering to coaches to supplement their coaching education. We will dive in here now, because part 2 actually has a lot to unpack in comparison to part 1. And we covered a good bit of ground in part 1. So just building off of that presentation, if I can get my slide to cooperate with me. There it goes. So you can see a little bit of what we talked about in part 1 in the order of content there. What we'll tackle a little bit today, and prior to the scaffolding of technique, just a little bit of a review of definitions and the such. If you have from part 1, those of you that were here for part 1, if you have your responses to the 2 little critical thinking questions that were at the beginning of that presentation, get those out at some point here in the next hour, and we'll go over those again at the end of today's presentation. So just some reminders for everyone as to our definitions. So here's a definition for technique as we use it in the game of soccer, and a couple of examples of particular techniques in the definition here. And keeping in mind that technique includes management of the player's body. And that is their balance, their speed, their coordination, their abilities to change direction, etc. So things that athletes, soccer players do without the ball, as well as things that they do with the ball, both fall underneath the definition of technique. And then what we're looking at in skill acquisition is, how do I begin to take technique and have it to become skill? Skill is what a soccer player does in a match, under the pressure of time, under the pressure of the opponent squeezing their time and squeezing their space. And how do I manage to be able to play in that? And then making skill choices, technique choices, depending upon the tactical situation. When do I play a long pass, a short pass? How do I execute the short pass, the long pass, as simple examples? So this is taking technique and being able to apply it tactically in a game, and being able to do so at speed, under pressure, and often in tighter and tighter spaces, depending upon the level of opposition. Your time on the ball gets to be less and less, so you have to be able to do things quicker, and so it's become skillful and not just technical. So this is, again, a little bit of understanding the nature of the game, and when we better, as coaches, we better understand the principles of the game and the nature, the design of soccer, the characteristics of soccer, then we can better design our training activities and our training sessions to be able to help meet those demands, meet that nature of the game, and to be able to better prepare for the players for the challenges within a game. So you can see here some of the definitions of the sport. And I've always been a proponent of thinking as a coach that soccer is organized chaos, and that within that constant changing environment and that very quickly changing situations that players are under, then to be able to have the skills to be able to deal with that is part of what I'm trying to achieve in my development of the players. And then it's thinking about this in a broad sense, as a part of the flow of being able to develop the players. So I think when I look at the top square, connection, I'm always looking for thinking about what connections can I make for the players from the activities that we do to the game itself. So now you go around clockwise from connection to play. So this could be the play that they do in a training session. If we're following the play practice play coaching methodology, that would be predominantly in the play two phase. If we're following other coaching methods, it's usually the quote unquote scrimmage or something that's match conditions at the end of a training session, typically. Then, of course, there's actual game day, actual scheduled matches, and how do they play and perform in that, and what kind of analysis can I do as the coach to recognize some of the technique applications where they're being skillful, where they are lacking, that I can then better design what I'm going to do in some other training sessions, and how their technique, their choice of skills affects the tactical situation, and how does the tactical situation affect their skills. So then I take it into practice, training sessions. We'll talk a little bit later here in this webinar about the difference between practice and training sessions, but how does the athlete, how does the player begin to actually improve at his or her technique and ball skills to be able to apply it in game situations. So that is that constant work that they have to go towards mastery. So one example, those of you that are familiar with the player development framework from US Soccer, when you look at the age group breakdowns and the different game models, you look at the 6 and under age group, or currently playing 4 versus 4. One of the techniques that is in there is shooting. And then you look at how that player development framework goes from 6 and under all the way to the 19 and under players. Shooting is still there. The shooting is one of those techniques, one of those skills that is constant throughout the entire framework for the development of players, no matter their age or the game model that they're playing. And so you take a look at shooting and you begin to pull back the layers of shooting technique and the many different ways that you can shoot, and being able to do so once again, eventually under speed, at pressure, on the ground, jumping off the ground, fully airborne, dealing with balls on the ground, bouncing balls, a ball in the air, to be able to finish with some kind of an attempted goal. This requires mastery because there's so many different levels to it, and so many different aspects of shooting technique. So working on that mastery is almost a never-ending process. And then we get into recognition. Recognition here, thinking about how do I take technique and recognize when and how to apply it tactically in a game so that it becomes skill and not just body mechanics, not just biomechanics, being able to shoot a ball in our current example. So it's that recognition of game moments, of recognizing how do I apply it in different game situations as a young player. And so that's back to now also the connection. What's the connection between my training environment, my game environment, the technique becoming skill? Okay, and so it's this constant cycle that you see in the graphic. So let's jump now into, for the coach, to be able to do what is called naked eye analysis. This is being able to take a look at how do I get players to recognize, or how do I get to recognize the breakdown of their body mechanics in their execution of a technique that's going to become skill. So this is them taking a look at, us taking a look at, without using video analysis, how do I do this on my own as a coach out in a training session, to be able to recognize what's going on with the players. So we're going to break it down into 3 phases. We're going to break technique down into 3 phases. The first part is the preparation phase. So this is that ready stance. This is the movement towards the ball, moving into the flight of the ball to be able to receive it, to be able to head it, to be able to catch it as a goalkeeper, to be able to shoot it first touch as a field player, to be able to deflect it as a goalkeeper, et cetera, et cetera. How do I move myself into the proper alignment with the ball? And then what's my body balance and posture and shape to be able to affect the ball. This is a piece that I have found in listening to coaches at coaching courses. When we ask them questions and try to point out things in regards to technique, this is a phase that they overlook. Almost everybody immediately goes to something in regards to the contact phase, which is phase number 2. Phase number 1 is this preparation. If phase number 1 isn't correct, and a lot of the body mechanics aren't correct in this phase, then the contact phase and the follow-through phase, which are phases 2 and 3, those then fall apart. There's bound to be a mistake. Often the mistake that is occurring in regards to contact phase comes from the preparation phase. So here's an example that we still see even with a lot of high school age players, kids in their mid to late teens, crossing the ball on the run, and the placement of their plant foot, right, as a part of the preparation phase. They frequently do not turn their plant foot to end up facing the opposite touch line. They're crossing from one of the flank channels on the field. They often have their plant foot, the toes of their plant foot ends up pointing basically towards the goal line, some angle to the goal line. They strike the ball and it ends up going off field behind the goal, out of bounds for a goal kick, or it ends up going too close to goal. And if that's against a good goalkeeper, it's probably an easy save for a good goalkeeper. If they had turned their whole body around by their plant foot pointing towards the opposite touch line, so that on the contact phase and the follow-through phase, their kicking leg swings across, they end up with their hips at the end facing across the field, they're more likely to get a good flight of the ball that's either a flat flight on the cross or an outswinger, depending upon the part of the foot that they hit, maybe an in-swinger, but they're more likely of not only keeping the ball in bounds, but getting a good flight on the ball. That's easier for their off-the-ball teammates to read the flight of the ball to be able to finish the cross, get a head on it, get a foot on it, what have you. So that's just one example, but it's a pretty common example of by and large, the American player's ability to be able to cross the ball on the run. Often the breakdown is in that preparation phase. If there's a technique breakdown, it's usually in the preparation phase, which might have a ripple effect into the contact phase, etc. So I want to emphasize how important the preparation phase is. Not that the other two phases aren't important, but the other two phases, contact and follow-through phases, are really affected by the preparation phase. So here's the contact phase, and this is choosing the right part of the body to be able to make connection with the ball, what part of the ball to connect with, and the importance of that. One of the other little slides that we'll show here a little bit later is about recognizing the different parts of the ball. And if I connect with the right part of the ball, then I'm going to have a better outcome in regards to my technique, in regards to my skill. So players making contact with the wrong part of the ball has obviously an effect, usually a negative effect, on the skill, on the performance of the skill. One example that I see frequently in regards to a push pass, a pass made with inside of the foot, is that players hit below the horizontal midline of the ball. And when they hit on basically the bottom half of the ball as they try to pass it, the ball gets a hop, a bounce, it gets into the air, when in fact they want a smooth roll of the ball on the ground, but if they hit below the midline of the ball, it's going to pop up on them. You also see this even more often in receiving a pass, that the player's receiving foot is too low on the ball, and the ball pops up. And now the ball's up around their knees, okay, this sort of a thing. And now they have to take an extra second touch, third touch, be able to get control of the ball instead of being able to control it on the very first touch and receiving the ball if they had received it at the midline of the ball. With young kids, the way that I often explain it to them is think about a globe. And I'm pleased to be able to report that most elementary school kids actually know what a globe is. They have seen a globe in school. I was worried that that was not going to be the case, given that, everything's so much more computers nowadays instead of an actual physical globe in the classroom, so the kid could visualize and understand where's the equator on a globe. And I'll ask kids, fourth graders, fifth graders, sixth graders, hey, where's the equator on the globe? Oh, it's right in the middle of that sphere. It's the exact same thing, kids, with the ball. Hit the ball at the equator, receive the ball at the equator, and then the light bulb goes off for the kids. So these are just a couple of examples, everyone, of the contact phase. So as the coach, when I observe a player in regards to his or her technique, I need to first look at that preparation phase, their approach to the ball, angle of approach, speed of approach to the ball. Now, then I have to look at their body posture, etc. Then I've got my contact phase. Are they making contact with the correct part of the body for the skill that they want to do? And then making correct contact with the right part of the ball. And we gave an example just then. And then the third phase is the follow-through phase. And this is an area of some mistakes by some players. So we will go back to the push pass as an example. A lot of young players, and even some older players, because they've just gotten into this habit, on a pass, they don't follow through fully enough. And then it affects two things. It affects accuracy and it affects power. It affects the pace of the pass. Because they, as you see in the second bullet point on this slide, they halt the follow through. They stop it short. They don't follow through fully. Okay. And as an example with the push pass, if a player follows through fully, then the pass is going to have better pace to it, better power to it, and it's going to be more accurate because you will have slightly longer contact time between the foot and the ball. That additional contact time between, in this case, the inside of the foot and the ball, it's going to improve your accuracy. And particularly if your follow through is towards your target, your teammate, or the space that you're passing the ball to, the follow through is towards the target, then you're going to be more accurate and it's going to have more power to it. The exact same thing is going to be true for shots on goal. Let's say in-step drive for a shot on goal. If they follow through towards the target, the part of the goal that they want to place the ball, they're going to be more accurate in placing the ball where they want it to go. But if their follow through swings too far away from their intended target, then they're going to end up mishitting the ball, right? And it's not going to be accurate pass, shot, throw for a goalkeeper, what have you, right? So those are the three phases that a coach can take a look at a player during a training session, during a match, to analyze what's going on in regards to their technique. If there's a breakdown, if there's a mistake, where did it occur? Was it in the preparation phase, the contact phase, or the follow-through phase? Once I, as a coach, get better skilled myself, I've been able to visually analyze that, then I can give correct guidance to the players, as opposed to just like you hear from a lot of coaches, right? They just say general things. And what's the most one we probably all of you here out at soccer fields a lot. When the kid takes a shot and it goes over the crossbar, a coach will yell out, "Keep your shot down." Well, yeah. Even a young player doesn't need that advice, because I can tell that the shot was too high, went over the crossbar. How do I actually accomplish that is the question in the kid's mind, and the thing that the coach should be answering by being able to analyze, why did the shot go over the crossbar? Was it I contacted the wrong part of the ball? The preparation run up to the ball was wrong, what have you. So it's being able to break it down as the coach and understand that. So here's a little 1-minute exercise for everybody. If you have a pen and a paper, do it on a computer, right? Something to be able to make notes. Okay. Take a look at, here's a good example of a header to score being well executed. Okay. It's still in the preparation phase, this photo, but it's a good one. But think about a header to score. Write down for yourself, please, in 3 phases: preparation phase, contact phase, follow through phase. What are the key coaching points for a header to score? I'll give you a minute and a half to do that. What are the key body mechanics, the 3 phases for a header to score? Okay, so hopefully you have a few good notes now in regards to what are the body mechanics for the preparation phase, the contact phase, the follow through phase. You're seeing here from Cristiano Ronaldo some really good examples for you in regards to the preparation phase and some of the things that he's doing with his body as a part of that preparation. What we did not see in this photo, obviously, is his run up to the ball and the way that he left the ground in order to get up in the air, the way that he jumped to be able to get up in the air, to be able to meet the ball for a header. So here, though, is the information. Oh, this is from when I do this in person at other coaching courses. So you don't have a partner with you. You just did this. Thank you. You did it on your own. Okay. And here we go. So here are the key coaching points for a header to score in the 3 phases. Take a look at what you wrote down. Take a look at what's here on the slide and just see how it compares for what you made notes. And this is from the Skill School Manual. If anybody does not have a copy and would like to have a copy, I'm glad to give that to everybody, pass that along. Just drop me an email, or we'll find a way to be able to share it. But here's the key coaching points for a header to score. And again, as the coach, if I'm familiar with these key points, these are things that I can all use naked eye analysis to be able to look at a player, look at him or her executing this particular technique, and then being able to break it down and see how it goes. The little parts that you see in each of the 3 phases that are in blue, those are of particular emphasis for the coach to get across to the player in regards to the execution of this skill. So you can see from this information that there's actually a fair bit of mechanics that need to go on. They are in each of these phases, they are in an order of priority, in order of a sequential order, okay, in the way that they actually occur when the player does this skill. So they're in a sequential order, basically A to Z, if you will. And if some part is missing, that might be where the technique is breaking down, if the technique is breaking down, for a player in this regard. So this is just one example. So now let's take a look at how we have scaffolded to be able to coach technique, coach skills over decades, over many, many years, and where we were and where we need to be today in modern soccer coaching today. So in the past, as sports, youth sports in particular, became more and more prevalent in American society, especially after the Second World War. This is the way that it was often, skills were often taught. It didn't matter if it was soccer, basketball, baseball, what have you, right? It was the thought of, well, we've got to take a look at the components of the game. So in this discussion, we were looking at technique, and the coach would take technique out of the game, so to speak, design drills and activities, more likely drills that the technique was just worked on and repeated, and there was a lot of block practice, what is called in physical education, block practice. So it was a lot of rote repetition, okay? And it was done, the technique was done in isolation, and then a lot of work on the body mechanics of the technique by the coach with the player. And then the player was put back into a soccer game and expected to execute it in a soccer game. And there would be probably some improvement, but eventually, as that technique had to turn into skill, which is being able to do the technique at speed under pressure in less and less space, that's where the breakdown began to occur. Right? So this is the way that the odds are, because this was prevalent for decades in the way that coaches coach skills in their sport. The odds are this is the way that you were coached, and most of us start off coaching the way that we were coached when we were a player, and so we're just trying to grow and evolve in this regard. So it's technique and isolation, block, rote, repetition was the way that it was frequently taught. So here's some definitions for you before I play the video. And this is just basic physical education. So what's the difference between block practice and random practice? When you take a look, and as you read this, if you take a look at what has been taught in U.S. soccer for several years now, in the grassroots modules and the D-license of the play, practice, play coaching method, that is almost all random practice. You start off with some kind of modified game, go into your practice phase with different activities, and then you finish in the play two phase with a larger game. And so that's random practice because you've got all of these variables are constantly changing in there. So hopefully have had a chance now to read through the two bullet points here. Take a look at the video. So in the video, connecting it for you back to soccer, as you're probably wondering, what the heck does this video have to do with us as coaches in the sport of soccer? And it is the escalator is that rote repetition. It's block repetition. It's the assembly line. It's the mechanical thing over and over and over again with no variables. It accomplishes to an extent what you want, right? The stairs in this case could go from the bottom to the top, from the top to the bottom. The escalator in this video was just taking you from the bottom to the top. You could use the escalator and get from the bottom to the top. You could use the stairs and get from the bottom to the top. But the escalator didn't provide any variables to it. It didn't provide any of the things that we have in the game of soccer, being organized chaos. It was just the same thing over and over again, which now when you take it and you get into an environment like organized chaos of a soccer game with multitudes of variables going on, it's harder to apply it and to apply what you learned in terms of technique to a variety of game situations. So the escalator is that block repetition approach. The piano stairs, as you saw people moving around and doing different things, okay, it gave the opportunity, doesn't guarantee, but it gives the opportunity for random repetition. This, everybody, as we'll touch on in just a moment, is also the beginning of a difference between drills and activities, game-like activities, right? Drills tend to be the escalator. It's the same thing, kind of the body mechanics, the rote repetition over and over. Whereas game-like activities tend to be random practice, random repetition, and has a different applicability to the game come game day. So this is the beginning of the next phase that we have gone through in regards to learning ball skills, is the integrated phase, where we're involving this physical sequencing and choosing a technique. So this could be, as an example, two players inside of a grid, and their job is to pass the ball back and forth inside of the grid. So there's physical sequencing going along. And then you take it as the coach and you evolve that little exercise into an activity that is called paint the grid. And now the idea is the ball is a paintbrush, and you and your partner inside the grid, if the ball has contact with the ground, then there's actual painting going on. If the ball comes off the ground, there's no painting going on. So it affects their choice of technique, how they execute the technique. Can we, in, let's say, 30 seconds, how much of the grid can we paint in 30 seconds with the ball as our paintbrush? That's physical sequencing. It's movement. It applies a variety to the choice of technique, in this case, inside the foot pass, outside of the foot pass, right foot, left foot, et cetera, in terms of how I choose the technique and how I'm going to apply it. So this is then, with this integration, we begin to get towards the idea of teaching games for understanding. So teaching games for understanding is a teaching approach for physical education. It was first developed in the 1980s at Loughborough University in England. It was originally intended for physical education teachers that were just teaching different sports and different activities in their PE classes. It has, over the decades, been picked up by team sport coaches, soccer coaches, football coaches in particular, and used in training and developing, in our case, soccer players, because the teaching games for understanding teaching method is very applicable to the organized chaos environment of soccer, right? And so when you look at the text on the left of the little video that's going, you'll see that it goes first, and you begin to put the athletes, the players, into the why situation before you get into the how. So it's putting them into small game-like activities where they have to problem solve and think it through and sort out the why. And then we're going to come up with a how. We're going to come up with a way to get the ball, and accomplish what we want to accomplish in regards to technique. So now there's a reason for the technique. And then there's a variety as to how you actually apply the technique in order to be able to accomplish learning within the game, learning within a game-like activity, and eventually the game of soccer itself, come game day, come match day. So if you want, I encourage you to do a little internet search, type in teaching games for understanding, or the Australians and New Zealanders call it Game Sense. You can type in Game Sense, but teaching games for understanding, you'll find a couple of websites dedicated to teaching games for understanding, and you'll be able to find, while it's kind of written aimed at, like I said, physical education teachers, 90% or more of it is applicable to us in coaching soccer, particularly youth soccer. So this then leads us to the step that we're at now. We're in this holistic approach, okay? As we have continued to evolve, the game evolves and coaching evolves along with it, and how we actually develop our players to be able to play the modern game. So now we're in the holistic phase, and this is where we're in game-like activities, in the bulk of what we do in a training session, whether it's some of it is going to be non-game form that you might hear in the coaching education courses now. That would be a great example of doing physical literacy exercises. Perhaps there's no ball, perhaps there's no opponent. That might be a non-game form, but that physical literacy piece, as we talked about in part one of this series, how crucial that is to being able to execute technique to become skill, is your management of your body, your control of your own body. Then it could be modified game form, it could be game form. Modified game form could be that non-opponent activity, like the one I described a moment ago of paint the grid, where two players are inside the grid and they're using the ball as the paintbrush and trying to paint as much of the grid as they can. That then could be evolved into, let's say, a 2 versus 1 activity. And now the two play, now it's no longer paint the grid, now it's keep away. Okay, and can you keep possession of the ball in a 2v1 inside the grid for a while, as an example? But it's all of it is responding then to cues that are going on. What are the game cues that are going on? Okay, what are the tactical cues? What are the cues in regards to what I'm doing physically as I approach the ball, my preparation phase, my contact phase, my follow-through phase? What's happening with my partner? If it's that 2v1, is my partner at a good spot to be able to play him or her the ball? Are they in a good body shape, body posture, body balance, etc., to be able to play? And so then it's the application, right? And being able to apply technique, in our case, in a multitude of different game situations. So now just an additional way, everybody, to think about how you might approach teaching technique through the ages of players and different levels of competition, depending upon the environment that the player and the team is in. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that I showed this slide to you. So here's in a very basic way, here's the divisions of a soccer ball, right? Just a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. And I start off with young players, as I mentioned earlier, with the horizontal axis and the idea of an equator, because if they've seen a globe, they understand an equator, and now they can visualize that in the way they go. I have done this with young players. I've taken a ball and used tape, different colored tape, and I'll make, one the horizontal axis and a different color the vertical axis, and then begin to literally help them visualize it, because there it is, right? And being able to see what happens when you get different parts of the ball and what's the effect. There's also obviously an effect on which part of the foot that you use, those sort of things. But if the coach understands this basic division of the ball itself and what happens when the player makes contact in the contact phase with different parts of the ball, then you can even further be analyzed with detail what's going on in regards to the technique that the player is doing. If it's correct or incorrect, and being able to give some guidance if it's incorrect. And so I have found that this is a good approach, and this is just a way to think about putting this information into the design of some of your game-like activities. And with young kids, thinking about how do I begin to progress them from age 5 or 6 on up to 18, 19, 20, 25, and continuously developing their skills with the ball. So with the younger ones, I have to first work on a rolling ball before I ever get to a bouncing ball or a ball in the air, a ball in flight. You need to work everybody with first the ball moving away from you. So go watch a game of 6-year-olds playing. They are better able to deal with a ball that's rolling away from them than they are with a ball that's rolling towards them or a ball that's rolling across their body. Because with the ball that's rolling away from them, they can run to the ball and match the ball's speed and direction, and then being able to manipulate the ball, be able to try to do something with the ball. You'll go look at kids that age playing, and when a ball's coming to them, towards them, particularly if it's got some speed on it, they often can't judge it, and it hits them and bounces off of them right before they're even ready to be able to try to do anything with the ball. Look at some high school age players and their abilities to be able to deal with the ball coming across their body. Look at crosses, look at corner kicks, right? And their judgment of the ball, particularly in the air, that's coming across their body is even harder. So here's the progression that you might find is useful in the design of some of your training activities. First, the younger they are, the more needs to be a ball on the ground, because there's another piece about the ball on the ground as opposed to a bouncing ball or a ball in the air, and that is the ball on the ground has a visual backdrop to it. And that visual backdrop, the grass, helps the player to be able to judge the ball's direction and its speed and perhaps its spin. When the ball is bouncing, and definitely when the ball is in the air, there is no immediate backdrop to the ball. So it's harder to judge the speed, the direction, the spin, the curve, etc. of the ball. So first is bouncing ball rolling ball away from you, towards you, across your body. Then I go to low bouncing balls and then high bouncing balls, and then a ball in the air as a progression over years to help players expand on their skills in manipulating the ball, doing things with the ball. So it has to do, everybody, a lot with some of the growth of the human body. And here's the 3 categories that we coaches need to be aware of to be able to help us understand as we evaluate players where that player might be at in his or her physical development, and then that effect on their ball skills. So proprioception, you can take a look at the far left with the tennis player for proprioception. That's your control of your body. Here's one example. All of us as adults are probably pretty good at being able to walk backwards without having to look behind us to be able to and not fall. Right? We would hopefully we would look first to see if there's objects back there that might trip over and whatnot. But if it's a clear path, we can walk backwards without having to turn our heads around and look as we walk backwards to be able to walk backwards. Try that with a 7-year-old, and they're going to end up stumbling, perhaps falling, struggling a little bit with their balance, right? Because it's a challenge to their inner control, their inner sense of balance as they grow. So you can see on the far left where the column says age. Age in this case is an example for athletes 7 to 16 and what stage they might be at. So you can see prior to age 9 for proprioception, it's still under functional development, basic control, balance, coordination of the body. having some sense as to where your body is in space, uh, in immediate space, broad space out on the soccer field. And then you get to around age 9 or 10, and it becomes pretty stable. And then there's just further development that you can do, as they get older. So then take a look at the vestibular part, which is the inner ear balance. And that is structurally developed at birth, but it's a constant growth in terms of balance. You can always, every athlete can always challenge him or herself in regards to improving their sense of balance. Adult soccer players are probably really good at their balance, but they might not be as good at their balance as a tightrope walker, as an example. So this is something that you're constantly developing, and recognize that as you look at here at the ages at which this is going on biologically, physiologically in the body. Now, what activities, exercises can I put them in to help continuously work on their balance and agility? And then that better control of the body leads to better control of the ball. And then there's visual, okay? And you can see at the bottom around age 6, 7, 8, immature visual acuity. This is the ability visually to judge, in particular, 3 things that have a big effect out on the field and a big effect in regards to technique and skill. One is the ability to judge distance, another is to be able to judge speed, and another is to be able to judge height. So several years ago, as an example, here's a little story. Several years ago, I was doing a coaching clinic in Florida. Had a group of coaches out there for the clinic. We were out on the field. We had just finished working with a group of 8-year-olds in different activities and whatnot. And we had a group of 16-year-olds coming next to be a part of the coaching clinic. 2 of the 8-year-olds were still there from that group, and 2 of the 16-year-olds had arrived a little bit early. So in my discussions with the coaches about this bit about distance, the player's abilities to be able to visually judge distance and the effect that it has on passing technique, shooting technique, distribution techniques for a goalkeeper, throwing or kicking. Okay? Being able to judge distance is a big deal to becoming an accomplished soccer player. So I took the 2 8-year-olds and the 2 16-year-olds, and I said, go right out here on the field, face each other, and stand 15 yards apart from each other. So the 2 8-year-olds got themselves set up. The 2 16-year-olds got themselves up 15 yards apart from each other. The 8-year-olds, their judgment, their sense of what 15 yards is and how far away 15 yards is, was in reality about 8 or 9 yards. The way they physically put themselves. The 2 16-year-olds were pretty much spot on for 15 yards. And it was just an example of the 8-year-olds were still learning how to judge distance. Their visual abilities, their comprehension, their understanding to be able to judge distance was still raw and still being developed. Whereas for the 16-year-olds, 15 yards, yeah, we've got that. We pretty well nailed it. As you see here on the graph for visual, where it says almost fully developed isn't until around age 10, 11, 12. And this affects their abilities to be able to judge not only distance to a target, open space, a teammate, the goal, the distance between themselves and the ball, the distance between myself and an opponent, the distance between myself and a teammate, etc. I have to be able to judge those things. But keep in mind that also visually needing to be able to judge speed, in this case, the speed of the ball, or perhaps also the speed of a teammate that I'm trying to pass the ball to. Passing the ball to a moving teammate as opposed to a stationary one, I have to be able to judge my teammate's speed. And then next one is being able to judge height. So a ball in the air, to be able to visually judge that is difficult because, as we said a moment ago, there's no immediate backdrop to the ball when it's in the air to help you judge its height, its spin, its curve, and its speed. That takes a lot of time to develop. It's called visual tracking acuity, to be able to develop visual tracking acuity. This then tells me that as the coach, I need to be patient in terms of working with young players on dealing with the ball out of the air. So things like being able to strike the ball on the volley, a goalkeeper being able to catch a ball above his or her head. Okay, a field player being able to head the ball. Okay, and judge it in the air, etc. Just think of any skill where the ball is in the air. That's going to take a lot more time to be developed because part of it is being able to judge all of those things about the ball that we just said. The distance it is, the height it is, the speed it is, okay, etc. And then being able to apply that in a skillful manner. So it's going to take a lot of time. So you'll see in the text to the right of the graphic where inside the parentheses, part of it has to do with the growth of the optic nerve. So the optic nerve is not fully grown to an adult level until around age 9, 10, 11, as you can see in that column for the visual, where it says almost fully developed, and you can see the corresponding ages. So there's a physiological fact that's going on, okay? And you cannot deny the physiological growth of the human body. You have to work within that, those parameters of the physical growth of the human body. So here then is a little bit more information. You can see here, goalkeeper has good visual tracking acuity to be able to read the ball in the air, in this case, to deflect the shot over the crossbar. Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of a variance between individuals as to when they begin to get better and better at this part of judging the ball and judging a lot of the properties of the ball. But just some more information for you there within the Skill School manual. If you ever want to take a look at that. Here's an example in training of becoming skill as opposed to technique.
Six versus three. Okay, so yellows, you're going to be in the goal. You have three players in the goal, and then three players defending. Okay, the three players on the outside just defend the red. Okay, so six versus three. I'll play the first ball into reds. All right, and just try and score as many goals as possible. Okay, all right. So three yellows in. Ready, reds? Here we go. And play. Ooh, out of bounds. Here we go. Good. Try to dribble out, yellows. If you win possession, try to dribble out. If you win possession. Good. And play it back. Play it back. Spread yourselves out. Whoa, whoa. Okay, hold it there. Keeper, when you win possession, just go ahead and play the ball back to me. Okay? Ball here. Then spread yourself out a little bit. Here we go. And play. Next ball in. Next ball in. Here we go. Play. Good. Well done. That's a goal. 1-0 Reds. Then again. Play. Gotta move for each other, Reds. You have to move for each other. Gotta move for each other. And again, open up. Open up. Good. Can we get a shot off? 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 Good. And hold up there. Okay, good. We're starting to move the ball a little bit better, but did we have opportunities to shoot the ball? Yes, we had a couple times where we took multiple touches, so we have to get a shot on goal. So make sure when that ball comes to you, take a preparation touch and then have a strike on goal. Okay? One touch to prepare it, right? And then a strike. Okay? Good. That's all right. That happened. Ball here. Right, here we go. Here we go. Open up, Reds. Open up. Good. And play. That's a goal. Unlucky. Play on. That ball's still in. Play on. shot. Good. Well done. Great save. Go on and hold it there. Let's change it around. Let's change it around. Yellows on attack. Okay, reds. You'll be defending. Okay? Spread yourselves out, reds. Spread yourselves out. Play and move. Here we go. Play. How do we score goals? So what surface of the foot do we need to use? So show me a laces shot. Out of the play a second. Okay? Take a preparation touch. Strike with your laces. Good. That's better. Okay? And ball here. Open up, yellows. Open up. Ready? And play. Good. Okay. Hold it there. Now, how many different angles do we have to score on? 3. So as the ball moves, we have to move. So when she got it, maybe you can move over there at a better angle to open yourself up for a strike on goal. Correct? Okay? So try to move that ball around. Try to move that ball around. Open up a little bit. Make yourself bigger, Yellow. Make yourself bigger. Make yourself bigger. And play.
So as you can see in the text to the right of the photo, one of the things that I like about this video example of a training activity is that the coach Eddie Henderson is coaching technique as well as tactics. Both are relevant to the purpose of the activity, but it's not coaching just tactics or just technique. He's coaching both. You got across a couple of different points to the kids through some questions and through also some direct comments in regards to shooting technique. We also got across to them in regards to attacking shape, some ideas about spread out and how their movement might be to be able to find an opening to score on one of the 3 goals with the triangle goal setup, and then he managed the activity, nicely. So it's an application of the principles behind teaching games for understanding. It's an application of a game-like activity as opposed to a drill. And in the game-like activity, the coach recognizing that there's going to be moments that I can ask guided questions or make comments on relevant techniques, relevant ball skills, or to tactics. It's not just one or the other. I can do both inside the same activity as the coachable moments arise inside that activity. And I thought you just might like the old photo of Messi when he was with Barcelona. And this is FC Barcelona. So activities like this are good for teams of that level and that caliber. You can use some of these activities, in some of your training with your players. Okay. So the difference between practice and training, just a concept to get across for us, but it has an effect on our focus of skill acquisition today. Here you see in the definition down below a little bit as to what practice is. So we're trying to make a little bit of a distinction between practice and training. Here you see in the cartoon the boy at home who's practicing on his own. He's practicing some of his ball lifting and ball juggling, and his audience is his hat. And this is something you can do, practice you can do by yourself, practice you can do with a friend or two, but you're doing that probably away from your team. It's away from the scheduled training sessions. I often tell parents the best training device that you could ever acquire for your young soccer player is a wall. If you have a wall at home, okay, a ball and a wall, okay, great training opportunities off of that. Then practice with a variety of different types of balls improves your coordination. It improves your visual tracking. It improves your balance. It improves your abilities to quickly adjust. So here you see Pele juggling an American football, right? Through Joe Namath, and some of you are old enough to remember some of this, okay? Joe Namath was a quarterback for the New York Jets way back when, everybody. And this is when Pele played for the New York Cosmos. And when he first got there, Okay, but the idea is practice your ball skills. Sometimes in your training sessions, sometimes when the kids are on their own, on different surfaces because it has an effect on the roll or the bounce of the ball. Try with different types of balls. Okay, I've run training sessions where for just for different moments, let's say it's a 4v4 activity, we're playing with the tennis ball, or we're playing with a regular size soccer ball for the age group, or we're playing with a volley ball. Just different, get different rolls and bounces, and it has an effect on their overall ball skill. Okay, and then you can see that sometimes you can even practice on the White House lawn if you're President Gerald Ford out learning how to juggle with a private lesson from Pele. So it's just practicing in a lot of different environments, and that can have a positive effect on your overall skill acquisition. And then here's what training is. So practice, we're trying to get across the idea, is more of what the player does by him or herself or with a friend or two. Training is what they do with their teammates and their coaches. This is the scheduled, formalized training environment, developmental environment, right? And this is where the coach comes in, with game-like activities and the methodology to have technique become skill, because we're in game-like situations that require the player to make decisions, game decisions, and as to how am I going to apply different ball skills. So it's then this environment mixed together, put it into the mixer, and out comes eventually, over years, comes high performance. So it is the question, how best to develop skilled players in game context skill training and isolated technique training. So there's your difference between training and practice. So the isolated technique training, the older the players are, the better they become over time to be able to understand that technique training that I'm doing by myself. It's a little bit of rote repetition style training, while it might not be the most dynamic and interesting and engaging for the player. But older players can mentally project into the future and realize, if I do this work now, it'll pay off for me in time. It'll pay off for me in weeks, months, years down the road. They can do that. The younger they are, the less capable they are being able to mentally project the work that I'm doing now paying off for me down the road. So this is where we want to take a look at more game-like activities that allow for random repetition. It allows for those 5 W's to occur more often. Here is a reminder for you as to what those 5 W's are that you as a coach are trying to affect in the design of your game-like activities and your overall training session plan. And there's our definition in a nutshell as to what is the difference between practice and training. And this has an effect on taking technique to become skill. And this is the basic physical education approach, just a little bit of a reminder for you as to the ideas behind different types of repetition: random or block repetition, rote, static repetition, as opposed to dynamic movement repetition, those sort of things. So you can see in the table to the left, here's the different approaches that you can take. The task is task A or B or C. The block repetition is we're going to do A over and over. A, and we're going to do B, we're going to do C over and over and over. Serial repetition is I'm mixing those tasks up, but it's still in a pattern. I'm going to do B, then C, then A, etc. You can see in the examples there. And then random begins to mix up completely, okay, as to which of the tasks that you're doing. You're going to do all 3 tasks at different times and in different frequency and different quantity of that, but this is then that more likely to be an organized random repetition, which is more like the game itself. Okay, and we mentioned this, I think, in part 1, but an integral part of skill acquisition is getting into pickup games, not just the scrimmage at a training session, not just the scheduled match that has an opposing team from your club, another club, has referees, et cetera, that whole environment. But pickup games where it could be kids of different ages to a reasonable degree, kids of different skill levels, ability levels within the game, could be a mix of genders, okay? And those pickup games are vital, important part of the development of skills and the players' abilities within the game overall. So it's remembering this. The game is the teacher, the pitch is the classroom. We as the coaches were the facilitators of their learning and their growth within the soccer environment. The player is the owner of the game and the owner of the whole experience. It's not we coaches being the owners, it's giving ownership of the game over to the players. So here's a reminder, and I asked you at the beginning of this part 2 to take out your answers from part 1, okay? Perhaps in the public chat, put in your answers to questions 1 and 2, either one of them or both of them, and just type that into the chat feature. And I'll give you a moment to do that, and then perhaps Warren can take a look and see what might pop up in the chat that we can share some of our answers to these 2 questions that we wanted to just mull over and think about from part 1. And in between that point and today, we've had time to gain some more information, some more knowledge, and how that might affect your definition of a skillful player and what are those characteristics of that skillful player.
All righty, go ahead. If you'll put those in the chat, I'll go and read those out. And while we're waiting on the chat, I'll just go ahead and do the advertisement for the next time. We've got John Trice coming on in the next round with North Carolina soccer. And so we'll continue that on January 7th, following the year.
That'll be great. I look forward to listening to that one.
I'll tell you what, we got another one. We got John Cullen as well coming up in February, the sports physiologist for U.S. Soccer.
Always a lot of great lessons from Dr. Coe.
Yeah, so I'm kind of excited about that.
Well, and coaches, if you've got the answers, your answers to these questions, that's fabulous if you want to share them. Otherwise, I hope that you're thinking about these 2 questions from part 1 that we are revisiting today here in part 2. And I hope that you've gained some more information as to what is the definition of a skillful player and what are some of the physical, psychological, tactical characteristics of a skillful player. And that you're beginning to see the difference between technique and skill and how we evolve technique to become skill and how it can be addressed in our game-like activities and training sessions along with the tactics. So just as a reference for you, here's some of the resources that I used in putting together the information in parts 1 and 2. And you can come back and take a look at this in the video that will be up on the North Texas YouTube channel. The 2 little bits down in blue are actually hyperlinks to a couple of videos, but you might want to just take those titles and plug it into your search engine for finding those 2 videos, and some really good information inside those videos that when I have done this presentation in a previous curriculum of the C course years back, we would have the coaches in the course, the student coaches in the course, view the video before looking at part 1, and then look at the second video before going over part 2 in the course. So you might want to just take a look at these resources when you get a chance to just use the titles and do a little Google search and find them. So just a little bit of levity here to finish with. If you've done all of the skill acquisition well, then maybe this happens.
Introducing the world's smallest and lightest digital SLR camera, the Canon EOS Rebel SL1. Fast action in a little body. The Canon EOS Rebel SL1, making small great.
And maybe that's the way that a lot of the parents are thinking their 5-year-old plays, but just a little bit of a humor here at the end. I hope everybody has a great holiday. Warren, thank you once again, sir, for the opportunity. Any questions that are popping up in the chat? If you have questions, let's go ahead and address them.
And one thing that's waiting on the questions coming too, I want to say thank you very much, because I know that when we talked about this webinar series as a whole, I think this does a lot of good as far as putting in different ideas into what we're gonna I'm gonna prepare for the different courses and the things needed, because I thought you did a great job explaining the skill acquisition piece and why it's important to blend that into the training session. And so that's just from a personal thank you very much for that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And then if anybody else has a question, if you want to unmute, we got a little bit of time. Blas, Eric, Saul, or Thomas, we'll be happy to cover whatever we need to. Looks like you've answered everybody's questions. So with that, I will shut off the recording. Once again, thanks for joining us again for this next iteration of the bi-weekly webinar. I look forward to seeing everybody back on January 7th. And like I said, if you missed this, then it's always up on the YouTube channel. Go back and review both parts 1 and 2, and it's been very informative. Once again, thank you for your time and all that you've given to Nortex and in our bi-weekly webinars, Mr. Snow. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Warren. Appreciate it. Take care, everyone. Happy holidays.